Hi, and welcome to my May wrap-up. So these are going to be the books I read in May. Obviously, I read 24 books, I know, and 2 novellas, and I actually finished a bunch of series this month, so it was a really productive month. For like a huge chunk of time, I was reading basically a book a day. I wasn't really watching a lot of TV, and I don't know, I was just really driven to read. The first book I read was Aeon by Alison Goodman, which I gave 4 stars. And this is a fantasy story that takes place in like a Chinese country. It's really an Asian culture, but it's definitely heavy on the Chinese in my opinion. And it's kind of like Mulan because in just the way that the main protagonist is pretending to be a boy so that she can do something guys or girls aren't allowed to do. And that's like work with these dragons. This culture is really heavy on these different dragons and that controls like their world kind of. It's sort of hard to explain. You really just have to read the book. Overall, I enjoyed it. I really liked the characters. I thought Eon/Eona was really interesting, and I liked a lot of the side characters. I don't remember her name. Oh, Lady Della, I think is how you say it. I don't know. I really liked that character. I thought that it was a really interesting character and not something I've seen a lot of, but there were times I was just confused about what was going on. A lot of my confusion was eventually resolved, but in the moment I was confused. And I think part of that was there were times when the descriptions got a little wordy and a little over the top, like unnecessary, like talking about things way too much. And I am excited to read the second book in the series, but I kind of needed a little break, especially since they're pretty substantial books, and the second one is even bigger. Next, I read My Life Next Door by Huntley Fitzpatrick, which was the Chiclets book club pick for the month of May, and I'd also been wanting to read it for a while, so I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars, and it follows Samantha, who has like this perfect orderly life, and she has these next door neighbors, the Garretts, who are kind of like chaotic and on their way to being the next Duggars. And she's been watching them for years, just looking at their life and the happiness in it. And she ends up meeting and building a relationship with one of them, Jace, and it's just about their relationship and her personal growth. I think it's so much about her personal growth, and it really sucked me in, which does not happen that often with contemporaries. I really liked the Garretts. They were like the stars of the book. They were fun. You wish you could be a part of that family, or at least I do. And I was surprised several times, like the twists and turns that this book took, and it gave me a lot of strong feelings, and I really liked Samantha. I think some people wouldn't like her, but I really liked her. I identified with her. I feel like we have similar thought processes about things. And next I read Red at Night, which was a free novella from Katie McGarry and Harlequin. And it's not directly connected to her other novellas in the Pushing the Limit series, but I gave it 4 stars, and I mean, if it's still free, for sure I would definitely recommend it, and if it's not, it's like $1.99, buy it, it's worth it. It follows Stella, who's poor, and she lives with her dad's ex-girlfriend. It's such a weird situation. And Jonah, who's like this rich guy who has like this perfect life. And they go to school together, but they weren't friends, and then they start talking at a cemetery, and there's so much going on with these characters, and their individual characters and their romance is well developed, considering it's a novella. A lot of times in novellas, romances are rushed, that's why I don't like them usually, and they just kind of feel false or fake. Really my only complaint is I wish we had more. Like, if she decided that she did want to turn this into a full-length novel, I would totally buy it in a hot second. Then I read another ebook, which was More Than This by Jay McLean. I gave it 3 stars. It's a new adult novel, and it follows Michaela and Jake, who they meet on prom night when she finds out that her boyfriend, like her long-term boyfriend, is cheating on her with her best friend, which apparently common theme in new adult. These girls need to find better best friends. And that, combined with some other things that happened that night, pushed them together as a couple. I thought it was a perfectly acceptable book. I read it in a few hours. It really sucked me in, so I can't complain too much. but I really couldn't get invested in the characters. Like, I didn't care about them really. I wanted to know what happened, but I didn't really care what happened. Like, it's weird. I know it doesn't make sense, but it does in my head. Also, I just thought it was way too sexual for me, and I read romance novels. Like, if you... this is a little too much. Next, I read The Treatment by Suzanne Young, which is the conclusion to the program duology, and I gave The Treatment 4 stars. I did a video review of it, so I will link that below if you want to check it out. I really liked the program, which I had read earlier this year. It dealt with a lot of like really intense psychological and mental issues, which I really enjoyed. This just took more of like an action turn, which is perfectly acceptable, and it didn't feel fake, but it wasn't what I was looking for, so that's why it just didn't get 5 stars from me. Next, I read Easy by Tamara Weber, which is another book I did a video review of, so you can just feel free to check that out if you want. Basically, this is one of the best new adult books I've ever read. Strongly encourage you to read it. The characters are amazing and awesome, and please read this book. My review does have like a slight PSA in it, and I do apologize, but I didn't want to edit it out. I think it's important, so I left it. But you can skip over it if you don't like it, but listen to it, it's good. But just read this book. It's so good. So good. 5 stars. Read it. Next was me finishing another series and reading Sweet Reckoning by Wendy Higgins, which came out on the same day as The Treatment, actually. They both came out on April 29th, and this ends the Sweet Evil series. I don't really know what it's called, but Sweet Evil is the first book, and then Sweet Peril, and then Sweet Reckoning. I gave this 5 stars. It's not the best book I've ever read, but it's a great conclusion, and it's totally in line with the other books. Like, sometimes I think conclusions in series take like a turn and feel different, like a different writing style. This doesn't. It still feels like the same book, like the same narrator. She's growing and she's changing, but it still fits in with the world. And I thought it was an amazing resolution. It had like the perfect combination of loss and happiness. I picked up Prodigy by Marie Lu, which is the second book in the Legend series since I read Legend in April, and I gave Prodigy 5 stars. It's my favorite in the series for sure. I really thought the world got fleshed out here, and a lot of my questions were answered, and she had me questioning what I thought I knew about the characters and the world, and what I thought a dystopian should be in like the best possible way. Whenever I thought I knew what was going to happen, she just like turn it, but it didn't feel like it didn't feel fake or anything. It felt good and real. And it doesn't progress the same way as other dystopians, which I really enjoy. And if you were iffy after reading Legend and you're like, I don't know, I would suggest picking up Prodigy, even if it's just like a library book or something, and then making the decision, because I think a lot of the weaknesses from Legend are removed in Prodigy. And of course, once I finished that, I did read Champion, which I gave 4.5 stars. I thought it was a really good ending. It's probably one of the best, if not the best, dystopian ending I've read. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to like spoil anything, but I thought it was a great ending, and in both of these books I loved being able to see so much of what was going on, and this one just continued to make me question things. Next, I read Breakable by Tamara Weber, which is a companion novel to Easy, and it follows Lucas's story and his background, and I'm really liking this companion novel thing. I'm just, if they're done well, they're amazing, and they just work really well together. And I gave this 5 stars, just like with Easy. Like I said, this follows Lucas, the male from Easy's story and his past. It's told in a really interesting way. You get to go back in time and be in the present, like it's like almost dual point of view, because if you know Lucas, it kind of is dual point of view. And I loved being in his head. It was heartbreaking sometimes, but it was really good. It just made me like him even more, and I loved his best friend. I'd love to see more of him. If she wanted to write a book about him, that would be cool. And even though they both got 5 stars, I think I like Easy just a teeny bit more, but they are both really good. Next, we have the Selection series. I feel like this is like this series of divided opinions, and it's not like the where you have people who really like it and people who really hate it. the people who read it literally can't decide if they like it or not. And I just think that's so funny. I've never seen a series do that before. And after finishing it, I think I lean towards liking it. Like, I plan to reread this series at some point in the future. I'll definitely keep the books because I think the covers are beautiful. One thing is, America Singer is annoying, don't get me wrong. I totally think she is. The Elite is the worst, but she's a little annoying in here too. And then Maxon starts to get annoying, I don't know. But she's consistently annoying. Like, the decisions she makes sense with her character, even if I don't agree with them and find them upsetting. I can understand, like, from her personality why she's making them, so I think that's why it doesn't bother me too much. Overall, I wish the world was developed more, especially the dystopian elements, but honestly, I don't think that Kiera Cass ever promised us that, so I feel like I can't dock stars for that. I mean, I think this was always going to be a romance and be more about America than the dystopian world. But I gave it 4 stars. The Selection is still my favorite book in the series, but I thought that this had a perfectly good ending. There were some things that were a little but not enough for me to really care that much. So it's my probably least favorite book of the month, Stealing Parker by Miranda Keneally. This was a huge disappointment. It got 2 stars. And I could not stand the main character, Parker. She was self-centered and whiny, and she's a horrible friend. And then she would complain when she said somebody wasn't a good friend to her. And it's like, really? All the crap you put them through? Like, I'm sorry, you're lucky you have any friends. And then I read some reviews on Goodreads because I was like, oh, do other people feel the same way? And it actually has pretty good ratings. So clearly, it's me. Just doesn't like it. But I did read some reviews that made some good points, where Miranda Keneally tries to address a lot of issues in this book. It's like not even 300 pages. Yeah, it's not even 250 pages. And she tries to address having a gay parent, religious disillusionment, taboo relationships. These are all interesting concepts, but in a 250-page book, to address all 3 of them, plus have a romantic element, plus it was just too much. She couldn't go in depth enough to make them feel real and fleshed out. She should have picked one and stuck with it. To me, the only good parts and the only reason this doesn't get 1 stars from me is because of her friends Drew and Will, and I don't think she deserves either of them as friends. I was only excited when they showed up on the page, and everything else was me just pushing through because I bought the book. I was going to read it and finish it. Next, I read Losing Hope, which was another companion novel, and this one goes with Hopeless by Colleen Hoover, obviously, and it follows Dean's story and more about his past and his relationship with his sister and everything. I really liked him in Hopeless, I really did. I think he and Sky have a really cute, kind of quirky relationship that I really like. But I just absolutely fell in love with him from reading from his perspective, and I loved reading about him and his relationship with his sister. It was so heartbreaking but so beautiful and honest, and Colleen Hoover isn't afraid to put things out there that could offend people, which I really respect. And I love the way she told the story. A lot of it is him writing in a journal or writing to his sister, and I thought that was really interesting. It made this unique dialogue that just I really enjoyed. Plus I like letters, text, anything like that. That's my favorite thing to read. And this just got 5 stars, just like Hopeless, and I honestly can't decide which one I like more. Next is Up from the Grave by Jeanine Frost, which is a paranormal romance, and this is the conclusion of the Night Huntress series, and it follows Cat and Bones, who are pretty typical vampires. The vampires in here really aren't too different from what you would expect, but I really like the characters. I love Cat and Bones, and I love their friends, and I love Vlad. He's barely in it, but I love whenever Vlad shows up. He has his own series though, so it's okay. And I thought the ending was satisfying. I wish I had a little bit more at the end, epilogue-esque, but I am hopeful that we might get more. I don't think so, but I can hope. And there's one character in here, his name is Ian. He's in it from the very beginning. I'm pretty sure, yeah. And he has really grown on me throughout the series. Like, he's had such a big arc and character growth that I just find him very interesting, and I think it would be cool if he got his own book or his own series. And then apparently did not get enough Colleen Hoover in my life, so I decided to read Maybe Someday, which I gave 5 stars. My favorite Colleen Hoover book. I was in such a book hangover over this. I know it won't look like it because I read more books, but that's just because if I don't read on my break at work, I'm just bored out of my mind, so I have to continue to read. Otherwise, I would have just like sat there and thought about this book for like 3 weeks. Really, the only thing that got me out of the book hangover was knowing that she was publishing another book in August. That was like, oh, I was like, oh, okay, I'm good. Not connected to this in any way, but just knowing that there's another Colleen Hoover book coming was all I needed to know. And I would definitely suggest this if you're looking to get into new adult, just because it's very, very light on the sexy times, and I think that's what turns a lot of people off. But it's a great introduction to the genre, and I loved the music and the soundtrack that goes with it. I couldn't stop listening to it, still love it. And I did film a review of this, and it should be up in like the next couple weeks, I think, so I just don't want to talk too much about it. But then I read some more ebooks. I read Fallen Too Far and Never Too Far by Abby Glines. They are my first Abby Glines books, and I gave them both 3 stars. They are also new adult novels, and they're about a girl named Blair, and she kind of like having a tough situation, and she moves in with her new stepbrother, Rush, and they're like attracted to each other, and then the fallout from that basically occurs. Did I say I gave both books 3 stars? I thought the characters could be a little annoying at times, and the plot felt a little superficial. The second one was in dual POV, like from Rush and Blair's perspective, which I definitely think helped. It added a little bit more dimension, but it was still missing something for me personally. But I read them both, obviously, and I read them both like in one day each, and I was sucked in, so I can't complain too much. Then took a departure from reading those kinds of books and decided to read a book from my TBR. My book cover got scratched. I'm really upset about it. And that's The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. I feel like this book has had so much hype about it, which is why I bought it, because I don't normally read like alien books. They kind of freak me out, I'm not gonna lie. But I decided to give it a shot. I did really like it. Cassie was a fun heroine, and she's kind of funny and spunky, which I feel like you don't really realize it at first, and then over time you're like, oh, she's actually kind of funny and sarcastic, and the book really needed that. It needed some levity at times, and so I appreciated that. There were tons of cultural references that I really enjoyed, and there were parts of it that reminded me of Independence Day, the movie, if you've ever seen it. My mom actually watches that movie every year on July 4th. It's like her July 4th tradition, so I've seen that movie several times. This book confused me like 80% of the time. I had no idea what was going on. I think it was on purpose, which is why I'm still giving it, I think I gave it 4 stars, so I'm still giving it like a decent rating, but it was hard sometimes. Just, I was so confused about what was going on and who I could trust, and it was a little much. But I will continue to read the series. The next book comes out in like September or October, I think. Then I just went back to the contemporary-esque books and read On Dublin Street by Samantha Young, and I thought that this was a new adult novel, but it's actually an adult romance. And it follows Joss, and when she was 18, she moved to Scotland to get away from her tragic past. And she ends up meeting Brayden, who then they start sleeping together, and this kind of forces her to confront her past issues and all of those things that she has been avoiding dealing with. And it was a little cliche and predictable, but I did enjoy it overall. I thought, especially a lot of the side characters, like Brayden's sister Ellie, I really enjoyed her. I thought she was a good friend, and I enjoyed her presence in the book. She kind of helped temper my feelings about Brayden and Joss. And there are companion novels to this series, and I would read them. Like, Samantha Young's writing style is approachable and fairly easy to read and enjoyable, but I'm not sure I'd pick them up right away. Maybe in like the next year or two. I did read another novella, like I said, and it's by Julia Quinn, who she's a romance novelist, and it goes with her Bridgerton series. And this one goes with Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which is Colin's book, if you've read the series. I don't want to like go into detail about that because that's just so much complication just to know what this novella is about. The novella is like, I got 2 stars from me. I don't really like Romancing Mr. Bridgerton as a book, so it doesn't surprise me that I didn't like the novella that's connected to it. Then I continued to make my way, slowly hitting myself in the face. I continued to make my way through the Percy Jackson series. I read The Titan's Curse, which is their 3rd book in the series, and I gave it 4.5 stars. It's my favorite so far. I mean, I liked the first 2, but just loved this one. I'm really enjoying seeing Percy and Annabeth and everybody just grow up. So many series, especially like these kind of series, take place over such a condensed period of time, Mortal Instruments, that it's kind of nice to see characters grow up every once in a while. I'm also liking where the story's going. I don't exactly know, like I don't have any predictions for Endgame, like what's going to happen. I'm just really liking being along for the ride. Next, I read 3 more Abby Glines books in the Rosemary Beach series, which is the other 2 books I read are part of that series as well. So I read Fallen Too Far, which finishes the trilogy from the other 2 books I read, so Rush and Blair's story. I gave it 4 stars. There were some issues with it. There were some really interesting plot points that came up but were then just dropped and never fully addressed, which just seemed to be characteristic of the series as a whole, so maybe that's just how Abby Glines writes. And then I read the like spin-offy duology about Woods, who's a side character, and a girl named Della, and those are Twisted Perfection is the first one, and then Simple Perfection is the second one. These both got 4 stars as well, and I liked their story much more than Rush and Blair's story. I just found it more relatable and more interesting and more compelling, and I thought their romance and personal stories were built much better, especially Della's. She was a really interesting character with a really different, interesting background. I kept trying to like guess what was going on and I wasn't right, but it was definitely an interesting thing. The ending was pretty intense for the first book, but because they're both out, it really wasn't that big a deal. You just move on. We're almost done, you guys. Almost done. So I was waiting for City of Heavenly Fire to come out, and I didn't want to get sucked into another book, so I decided to do a reread, and I reread Crash Into You by Katie McGarry, which I'd read back in December, and it got 5 stars, just like it did last time, because it's so freaking good, and I think I've decided this is my favorite one. Before I was struggling between this and Pushing the Limits. Now it's this one. Currently. This one. Take Me On, I should be able to read in the next week or so. Perhaps that will take place, but for now it's this one. And I'm glad I did, because Take Me On is about Rachel, the girl in this book's her brother, so I'm glad I get to like reintroduce myself to him. I really enjoy Isaiah and Rachel, both of their stories. I identify with Rachel a lot. And then one thing, just, I'd never talked about this before, I think, and it's really not important, I guess, but it's interesting, is I always pictured Isaiah when I read Pushing the Limits and Dare To. No idea why. Pictured him as black. And so when Crash Into You came out and I saw the cover, I was like, that's not Isaiah, that's a white dude. And seriously, when I'm reading the book, I'm picturing a black guy, not this dude. I have no idea where I got this from. It doesn't change the story in any way. It's just interesting what your brain like creates as a character. Weird facts, every time I look at the cover I'm like, no, that's not Isaiah. Because it's not who my head says Isaiah is. I don't know. And then, ugh, can I pick it up? Oh my gosh, this video is so long. I'm too tired. I read this. Beautiful, beautiful book. I read City of Heavenly Fire. Not sure if you've heard of it, but it's the last book in the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. For real this time, I think. Who knows with her. I read it in like less than 12 hours. I like Instagrammed when I started and Instagrammed when I stopped, so I thought it was a really satisfying conclusion. I gave it 5 stars. It's probably not my favorite book in the series. I think City of Glass is probably my favorite, but I thought this was a perfectly acceptable ending. I was pleased with what happened. I don't want to spoil anything, but I am excited to read The Dark Artifices, which comes out in 2015, and I did do a video where I talked about like spoilers and questions and comments and stuff. that should already be up, so I will link that below if you want to watch that. But I would only watch it if you read the book, because I don't screw around. I go right to spoilers. So if you want to know more about specific things, I talk about it there. Oh, and I think it's interesting how many theories people had that are like completely non-things in the book. And it's just funny because you think about things so much and then it becomes like a non-issue, and it's like, oh, you put all that effort in. And which is why I did not make theories. Didn't even guess who was gonna die because didn't want to be wrong. But I still enjoyed watching our race theories videos and look forward to more. I have a feeling that somebody's gonna make a Dark Artifices theories video, and I will love it if that happens. Won't be me though. Well, I say that, it could be me, but probably not. So those are the books I read this month. I feel like I talked really fast because I was trying to do this as much as possible. If you read any good books this month, let me know down in the comments. And thanks for watching. Perfect timing. My battery light just came on. Bye.